BJJ athletes that consistently perform at their best in competitions win more tournaments. But the problem is, most of the time, competitors are anything but consistent, which is why their performances are up and down like a roller coaster. I'm a mental performance coach to serious hobbyists, to multiple time world champions, and in this video, I'll be breaking down 8 things insanely consistent competitors do differently. And if you're not doing these, that might be the reason why your competition results are all over the shop. All right, let's jump straight into it. Number 1 is simplicity kills. First thing you need to do is to learn how to kiss like Roger Gracie. Roger is one of the greatest BJJ athletes of all time, and if there's one thing that we can learn from him is how to kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. Roger is one of the masters of doing boring and simple things well. His game was so simple, super simple, and it was incredibly effective. You know, he would just pass guard, get your mount, cross collar joke, job done. That was it. Everyone knew what was coming, but they couldn't stop it. So elite athletes like Roger Gracie embrace that boredom, that repetition, and that is exactly what sets them apart. So what we can learn from Roger is to do the boring and the simple things well. Jiu-Jitsu is really a game of repetition, you know, the same guard passes, the same escapes, the same grip breaks, you know, thousands and thousands of times. And elite athletes embrace this boredom and repetition, and that is exactly what sets them apart in the long run. So, action for you here is decide one area of your game that you're going to dedicate all your time to. So if it's guard passing that you're working on, maybe for the next 4 weeks, you work on becoming an absolute master at outside passing, for example. So your goal is to choose one area, and everything that you do around skill development, watching film, watching instructionals, drilling, everything is geared towards becoming an expert in this area. And if it gets boring, good. That means you're on the right track. And if you think it's hard to do this, just imagine how hard it's going to beat that guy in competition who's doing this and you're not. So number 2 is mindset matters. So consistent athletes understand that no amount of physical training can fix their mental deficiencies. You know, there are 168 hours in a week, and physical training takes about 10% of this. Sleeping takes another 35%. So what you're doing with the rest of that 65% is what really moves the needle. If you want to unlock your full potential as an athlete, you have to invest in your mental training. We all know someone who is an absolute nightmare in the training room and never gets tired and absolutely bulldozes through everyone in the training. But when the competition comes around, they shit the bed and are basically a shadow of themselves in the competition environment. So this is all down to lack of mental training and not having the tools to deal with the pressure of competition. And the key to unlocking your full potential is to have a mental training framework. That being said, if you need my help with your mental training, check out my BJJ Mindset Mentorship. I'll have all the links down in the description, and you can start to take your mental game to the next level. Number 3 is be a goldfish. You know, in Finding Nemo, that Disney Pixar film, there's that one character called Dory. And she just struggles with short-term memory loss. So consistent performers are like goldfish, or they're like Dory. They have this short-term memory, you know, mistakes, losses, even big wins in competition, don't throw them off track from their process. You know, if they lose, they'll learn and then they'll flush that performance and then go and get the next best thing. If they win, they continue executing their process towards their next goal. What I get my athletes to do is just that. After a win or a loss, write down what they did well, what they can do better, and how they're going to do it. And this, you know, is the learning part of that process. Then after that, mentally or physically, flush the performance. So this could be that you just walk to the toilet, flush the toilet, and this will be a physical trigger for you to let go of that performance, right? You learn from it, now you flushed it, now it's time to let go. Third step is to ask yourself, win. What's important now? So after you learn from the performance and you flushed the performance, it's time to focus on the present moment. Be where your feet are. Maybe after the tournament, it's just time to spend time with your family. Maybe you're going out for a meal with your teammates. Put all your focus onto that. What's important right now is maybe just going to support your teammates. And if that's the case, go and do that. The answer is never to dwell and mope and sulk about your performance. That will not help you. That's not going to help you get better. That's just going to leave a bitter taste in your mouth. That's it. So the lesson here is to have a short-term memory and lock in back into your process as quickly as humanly possible. Number 4 is to have infectious optimism. The fictional fish Dory isn't the only one with unlimited optimism. One of the big things I took away from spending 2 days in Poland with Owen Jones was how optimistic he is. He has this belief that future will be better than the present. And that is just so infectious, and you can just feel that confidence oozing out of him. And this is one of the reasons why he's so consistent on the competition mats. In just under 12 months, Owen went from taking 3rd place in IBJJF Worlds at Blue Belt to winning ADCC trials against seasoned black belts. Even after the Blue Belt Worlds, he came to the ADCC trials full of optimism, full of confidence, really believing that he would win that tournament. And trust me, we all have a reason to have that same level of optimism and confidence. Don't believe me? All right, let's do this activity. Grab a pen, grab a paper, and just list out all your accomplishments you can remember, and think of in the last 5 years. We forget very quickly how far we've come. And I bet the version of yourself 5 years ago would give their left arm to be in the position that you're in right now. It doesn't need to be just about BJJ competition, but maybe life in general. Now imagine taking that piece of paper, you're getting ready for competition, you're starting to feel those nerves, you're not feeling confident. Now imagine pulling that piece of paper or that note section in your notes app on your phone and reading through all the reasons why you're proud of yourself, you should be confident, right? Imagine how you would feel going into competition. I will guarantee it will shift the way that you feel about competing that day. So let that fuel your next performance. So take your notepad, take your pen, list down all your achievements, the reason you should be proud of yourself, and trust me, that will completely change how you compete from this point onwards. Number 5 is for you to have high standards for yourself. So Wagner Rocha might be the most consistent athlete I've ever seen or worked with, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Most athletes turn it on when they sign up for a competition or they get invited into a super fight or a bracket, whatever it might be. The problem is that most of these athletes, they turn it on when they have something coming up and then they completely turn it off, right? And then there's no consistency in how they go about their life and how they prepare for competition. The consistent athletes I work with, they don't do that. They hold a high standard all year around. They stay ready, and that doesn't mean that they will never take breaks. We plan their holidays, we plan their recovery weeks, but everything is done with intention. If it's off season, maybe it's about skill development or hitting the gym harder. This is the time you can afford to be sore because you're not peaking for a competition. If it's pre-season, that's when you ramp up the intensity in training. You might be competing more in practice, testing your game plan, pressure test your skills. But whatever the phase is, it's done to a high standard. Even rest is done properly. When my athletes take time off, I want them to really take time off. I ask them to fully switch off from the sport. When they come back to the training room, they're fresh and they're ready to go. And that is exactly why athletes like Wagner Rocha are ready at a moment's notice. It's not because they get ready fast, it's because they never let themselves get out of shape mentally or physically. When Wagner came down to London to do some seminars, I remember he was still sticking to a routine. You know, he was having cold showers, he was doing this strength and conditioning, he was getting training in. He didn't fully switch off because it wasn't a holiday, it wasn't a planned holiday for him. He stuck to his routine, he stayed consistent, and even throughout his travels, he found a way to stick to these high standards that he set for himself. All right, here's an action step for you. This is something I do with my athletes at the start of every year, but depending on when you're watching this video, you know, just look at the next 12 months. Grab a calendar, look at the next 12 months and plot out, first of all, what are the most important competitions that you want to peak for? That are the most important ones in the calendar. This could be any of the majors, you know, Euros if you're going, maybe it's the ADCC trials, maybe it's the, you know, IBJJ World Championships or Masters Worlds, whatever it might be, plot out your most important competitions. And once you've done that, now you can start to build structure around that. So if you have, say, the Worlds in December, for a lot of my Masters athletes, that means that we're going to take the start of the year as off-season. That could be a time for them to focus more on their business, or if you're a professional athlete, that could be a time for your off-season to switch off. So straight after the Worlds, you switch off and take time off. Once you had a little bit of rest, then you turn into, you know, absolute monster in strength and conditioning. Maybe you're lifting heavy, you know, 4 times a week. You're allowed to be sore because, you know, the training is a little bit lighter in the BJJ area. Or maybe it's an opportunity for you to develop more skills. And in pre-season, you can start to slowly ramp up how much you compete in the training room. And then in season, it's all about performance. How do you just peak your performance and bring your practice game into competition so you can perform at your best when it matters the most? This looks a little bit different from athlete to athlete, but the goal stays the same, is to attack the year with intention and raise your personal standard across the board. And talking about intention, number 6 is that intention matters. The most consistent athletes I've worked with have this mentality that everything matters. They have a plan for every single training session. You know, sometimes it could be competing in practice and pushing hard in sparring rounds. And other days, it's about, you know, technical focus, but there's always a purpose for that training session. They never just go through the motions. And it's the same way in their lifestyle. They track their nutrition, they don't, you know, binge eat, and then they spend next couple of weeks trying to fix the damage and get back into shape, right? They stay on a strength and conditioning program year round, right? You know, it might change, the programming might change depending on what part of the season they're in and the frequency and the volume, but they're always working towards something. They leave no stone unturned, and the confidence they get isn't from hoping they're better than the opponent. It's from knowing they prepared intentionally every single day. When I spoke to the ADCC veteran Keith Precorin, Keith might be the most successful ADCC trialist of all time. And this is exactly where he said his confidence comes from. His preparation is so consistent that by the time he competes, he knows he's done everything he possibly could, and that feeling is absolutely priceless. So here's the lesson. Excellence in the small things is excellence in all things. So if you do the little things right, the performances will follow. Number 7 is having big goals, but even a bigger why. You need to have absolutely massive, almost embarrassing goals. This could be becoming a multiple-time ADCC world champion, winning the IBJJF Worlds, you know, record-breaking times, becoming a CJI champ. Big goals force you to show up differently. They also push you to really look at your process. If your goal is just to win a local tournament, you probably don't need to change a lot of things. But if your goal is to win the Masters Worlds or the trials, you probably need to change a few things to bridge that gap. But having goals isn't enough. We all felt the rush of, motivation the first week of chasing your dreams, but that motivation fades very, very quickly, and that's where commitment needs to take over. When your commitment is greater than your feelings, you get results. Your commitment relies on your why. Why you really want to achieve this goal is super important. And also what you're willing to give up in the process. When you have a big enough reason why, the how's not a problem. So the lesson here is to set bold and big goals, big enough to scare you a little bit, to make you a little bit nervous, and have an even bigger reason why, so you can execute your process with consistency. I want you to grab a pen, grab a paper again, maybe the same one, and write down your big goal. What's the biggest goal that you want to achieve? That doesn't mean that winning a local tournament isn't a goal of yours, but what is the end goal? What is the final thing that you want to achieve in your journey in Jiu-Jitsu? Maybe that's Masters Worlds, maybe that's European Championship, maybe that's become a multiple-time ADCC World Champion, but whatever that is, put that up there. That's your number one goal. And then I want you to write down all the reasons why you want to achieve this goal. Because remember, once you have that big enough reason why, the how is less of a problem. And then step number 3 is what are you willing to give up in the pursuit of this particular goal? That could be giving up some little bit of social time, giving up playing PlayStation late at night, maybe it's giving up junk food, giving up drinking, whatever it might be. There's always an element of cost in achieving your goals or pursuing your goals. So that's the 3 steps. Write your big goal, write your reasons why, and write what are you willing to give up in the process of achieving this. Number 8, show me your mates and I'll show you your future. Now, you probably heard the saying, you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. This would be your training partners, your coaches, your teammates, your life partner. If they're not pushing you forward, then they are holding you back. There's no in between. Consistency requires an environment that supports your goals and people who hold you accountable and push you forward. Even Navy SEALs, who are one of the most consistent and resilient human beings in the world, have accountability partners. They call them their swim buddies. So the lesson is to surround yourself with people who fuel your mission, especially on the days when your motivation and self-belief might be a little bit low. So action for you. You knew this was coming. Take stock of the people who you spend the most time with and be brutally honest. Do they help you or do they hinder you in the process of achieving your goals? So this is not me saying that you need to dump your missus because she's a little bit toxic or find new friends because they're all, low lives. But I really encourage you to go and start spending time with people that really elevate you, that give you energy, that help you move forward. And if you start doing that, even just making a small shift, that can make a huge, huge impact in how you go about your day-to-day business and will 10x your ability to achieve your goals. Now, if you go and take action on these 8 tips, I will guarantee you will see results in the long run. Just take the lowest hanging fruit, what feels easiest for you right now, go and take action on that, put some pen to paper and get it done, and then you can build up from there. But if you want to build consistency on the mats, this is the way to go. If you like this video, then you'll absolutely love this video right here about the 3 mental tricks that will help you stop freezing on competition day. So if you want to pull the trigger in your next match, or you're struggling to pull the trigger, just click this video here and I'll help you out.